Shalom, shalom, family. I'm just going to get right to what I'm going to start talking about. I just want to talk about. So, my wife had got a DNA test and she had got L3. Now, what's interesting about L3, we did a lot of studying on L3, and we know that L3 was actually found in Syria. But I want to talk about what Family Tree has here and what their response was after I had talked to them about some things. I think it's very interesting. So again, we do this thing unbiasedly, and we're gonna just talk about what's talked about here. So real fast, while I'm doing that, let me just send this out real fast. I'm just trying to make sure everything I could hear everything and everything. All right. So let's do the Lord's Prayer before we start. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread. Forgive us of our trespasses, as forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So I just want to talk about this. So if you've seen, we did a couple of different videos on L3, the truth of the Tufian E, the Y chromosome that's found in the Middle East, and the L3 in sequence with them that's found in ancient Syria. I had did one in a contributor with a brother, Will, son of Yah, the Shemitic DNA, finding evidence for the Shemitic DNA. But I want to talk about that real fast. The reason why I want to talk about that is because I think it's important that we examine truth for what truth is. I think truth is very important. But let me refresh this page real fast. Let me just close this and refresh it. Because I really want to talk about this. If this little page don't load, I just showed it right just at the beginning that my wife is L3. So I take it very personal for information to be accurate. I take it very personal for accurate information to be given. So let's look at this. I'm gonna show you what happened with FamilyTree. So obviously, let me show you something real fast before I even talk about that. In fact, that's why I needed that open to talk about that subject. Actually, I don't need it because it's gonna be right here. I'm gonna talk about it here where we talked a very interesting talk. So I had a conversation. Long story short, I'll explain the conversation. So I had seen L3 said 50,000 years ago, L3 was in Africa, right? I just want to, in fact, I want to pull it up. I want to pull it up because I really want to talk about it right from the site. All right. All right. Let me see if it'll load up and get right to it. They probably like keep a watch on that page. He keeps talking about this stuff. Can't let him keep talking about this stuff. All right, now look at this. I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna click this. I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna read it to you, and I'm gonna show you that FamilyTree has not updated their information since 2010. All right, this was up. This is 2009. Watch what it says here. So this is based on a bill 17 from 2009. They haven't updated information since 2010. The information that we know on L3 is from 2014. Part of the L cluster of haplogroups, which has been I don't know what's going on here. I'm not going to click that because it does something. But let me read this real fast before this page mess up. This haplogroup dates to approximately 50,000 years ago. Now, this is where it's important. It said that it's detected in Africa. Now, if you look at the chart when they show L3, they show that it never left Africa. Did L3 never leave Africa? Is there no evidence of L3 outside of Africa? Let me show you something. Let me show you something. I don't even have to pull up a note. I can just type it down. Watch this. If you type L3 in Syria, or just put, let's make it a little easier, or just Syria. Maybe I should have put that first. Ancient Syria. Put that all weird. If you put L3 in ancient Syria, you'll have some interesting information. In fact, I got to think about how it's worded to find. I'm just going to go off the note. It's easier just to go off the note. Let me close this. All right, let me show you something. And I'll show you it's not hard to find. It's really not. It's really, really not hard to find. I just got to think about, sometimes it's about wording on how things are worded. All right, so let me show you something. So when you go to the pre-pottery Neolithic time, that's actually what it is in the pre-pottery Neolithic B. That's when you first find L3, right? Now, I'm going to show you something about L3. It's really interesting. Very, very interesting, right? Looking at Syria and things like that, you'll find some very interesting quotes, right? Obviously, you got your E lineages up there, E1B1A up there. You got your E1B1B in these areas, found in multiple different areas, not just these, but there's 90 different areas that they have that found. They also found L3. Now, this is very important because obviously these things always have sources. They always cite their sources to these things. But before I even click that, remember it's talking right here. It's talking about they found in pre-pottery Neolithic B, they have found MT clad L3. Right? They found L3. It's very important. So if they found an L3, we got to look at some evidence of it and see what are they talking about. Let's look at it. It's actually when they look at what's there, they found multiple L3s, right? I'm gonna read it off of what they say on their thing. So I'm gonna leave this here real fast, and I'm gonna read a few little pieces of L3. So we already know that, right? Eva, I don't know how you say that. She found these haplogroups. She found U, R, K, H, N, L3, right? That's important. That's important because where is it found? It's actually found it at Tel Halula, right? This is very important. At Tel Halula, they found L3, right? That's important. That's very, very important that they found L3. And this is coming from a real genetic site. And what time is this? Because I'm going to show you what FamilyTree DNA says, right? May 2018, right? This is future. This is more future. Let me show you something. All right. So also let me read you a couple. There's a couple different sayings. I don't want to go through them all, but I'll show you just some just to show you what we're talking about here because I had a long talk with them and everything, and I just want to show you the conclusion of that talk because the conclusion is that basically saying, well, our information isn't updated, so we're not going to put that. For real, for real. That's their answer. I'm going to show you what's their answer. It's really interesting. All right, so right here. All right, so watch. This is something that is everywhere. You can find it anywhere. It's almost everywhere. I can show you all these sites. I'm gonna click them too to show you the dates on them. All right, so based on the age of basically L3, right, from which all maternal Eurasian and majority of African lineages originated, that out of Africa has been dated to around 60 to 70 KYA, right? So 60 to 7,000 years ago. On the opposite side, we have opposed a northern route through Central Asia across the Levant for that expansion. So it's saying that through Asia, through the Levant, that the L3 actually came from. I'm going to show you. Remember, Tel Halula is where they found it. And I'm going to show you all the pieces. And I'm going to show you what FamilyTree is. And I'm going to show you 100% that they didn't update their information. I'm gonna let this thing load in. Oh, okay, there we go. So it's found here, and they say from Asia because remember they also call this Asia. You see that in the Bible, in the New Testament, you'll see that they'll say this is Asia, right? And they say that the route came through the Levant to Africa, right? Through the Levant to Africa. But let me show you something. I want to get back to this, and I want to show you something, right? They just say it went to the Levant to Africa and whatnot, from Asia across the Levant for that expansion, right? Consistent with fossil records. This is what's really important. If you see any report for anything, if they make any conclusion at all, tell them, do they have fossil records? Is it fossil records? So a lot of people pull up hypothetical quotes and think hypothetical quotes throw things away. But that's consistent with fossil record. We have dated it around 1,205 KYA or 1,025 KYA, right? Let's understand this. Let's understand this. If this was supposedly 125,000 years ago, and the out of Africa idea was the only way to make L3 African is to not put this report. Let me show you something. And obviously it's in pieces, right? If you want to read it, you can pause it and read it. Otherwise, I'm going to show also when we talk about it in these videos. Let me show you something. All right. So after a long talk, I sent them all that. I'm gonna show you what they said. So this is from an information specialist. It says, this email is regarding the feedback I submitted on your behalf. I made sure to forward everything we discussed. I want to notify you of the reply that I received. All right. So she obviously would send the reply to some higher up. It says, many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. You heard what he just said there? So that's why the world's in confusion, because the people who's giving you your genetic information, a lot of them are not updating their information. There's so many things that came out after 2010 that it makes zero sense that they keep coming with their own conclusions. By not putting this paper out, they can say what they want with other types of groups. That's important to understand. L3, let me show you something, what they got for 2010. L3 is not native to Africa, but that's what they put here. They put your origins. They say L3 is native to Africa, but let me show you. Let me just show you something. It's not finished yet. So remember that many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. We are in the process of updating them. We are in the process now. You're in the process of updating L3, but wait till you see what they said about this. Wait till you see what they said about this paper. We are in the process of updating them and plan to have these updates released soon. Watch what it says here. There is evidence of L3 in Africa. Okay. However, that does not mean that it cannot be found in those outside of Africa. Now, here, watch this. Obviously, not knowing the report at all, not updating the report. They're relying on everything from 2010. Haplogroup L3 is approximately, they say this is how old it is. Okay, so how many reports do we have from different sources? These are different genetic sources. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you all the different sources where these come from. And this is just some. Here's one. You gotta discredit these. They have to discredit these people because you know what they're saying? Okay, it says L3 is only approximately 59 years old. So watch what it says here. So it is not possible for it to have been anywhere 1,200, I mean 100,025 years ago. Okay, let me say something. I believe the biblical narrative. Okay, I don't believe these large numbers. Understand that. But what I do understand based on these numbers, they have a system where it's important to understand anything that's past 70,000 years, wherever it's at, that's where it's been. It wasn't in Africa originally. Anything that's over that too, if it starts, like for example, they say MN started around, they'll say about 60, 70,000 years ago. And they'll say that it was in Europe. They'll say they never been in Africa. They always been in Europe. But this one's found outside of their time frame. Their limit for the out of Africa, anything, right? 70,000 years ago, they say everything's outside of Africa. 170,000 years, 60,000, 50,000, everything found outside of Africa, that was outside of Africa. That wasn't native to Africa. That's why I say a lot of European groups were native to Africa, because a lot of them are found outside of Africa. But what's important to understand is that L3 has fossils, right? They're dating fossils older than the finds that were found in 2010. These fossils were found in Upper Syria. I'm going to show you all the reports. It says, so it is not possible for it to have been anywhere 100,025 years ago, or have existed anywhere for a period of 70,000 years. They say it could have been older than that. I agree. There's no way these dates are true. We hope that you will look forward to the future updates, this and that. I'm going to show you what was said later on, but so obviously I'm bringing it out like you're saying it's not true. Let me show you something. Okay, so you see here? Okay, I accept. Okay, you see what's going on here? Carriers of basically L3 basal lineage migrated back to Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. What date is this? 2018. What did they say? Why are they telling me what they're saying and they don't have an update? Since many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. See what they're saying? This is 2018. 2018 says L3 was outside of that area. Now, remember I was telling you about M and N? Now, it probably sounds confusing. I'm telling you, genetics is not that confusing. I'm telling you, it's really not. It's really, really easy. But all you have to do is understand this, the basics of it. There's like three major groups with the mtDNA. M, N, and L. That's all you have to know is M, N, and L. M and N, they usually say those are your age, and they say those are going to be out of Africa. Then they say African ones are L. But this is actually going to be where they find out that the L lineage, which they also say themselves, and Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome haplogroup E, right? And then it says inside Africa, it just talks about all these things. Let's keep going. Let's keep going because there's a deeper part on this note right here. In fact, we could keep going on this one, but let's pull up another one. So this is one site. So you can see this is one site. All right. This is another site. See what's going on here. Just talking about where it's found. This is going to be a little information here. I'm going to go over here. But click on this one. Here's another site. Right? So what they're saying is this is what they're saying. They're saying there's no way that is that old. And yet their information is only from 2010 and they want to talk. Look what's going on here. So there's another piece of information. .gov. Are they gonna discredit this .gov that came out 2018, June 19, 2018? Are they saying this is not true? Carriers of basically your same thing, L3, basal lineage migrated back to Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. This is a different one. Talking about the same thing, connecting it with your E haplogroup. Right? You're from E haplogroup, the split of the Y copies basically E, D, your DE, right? Haplogroup is very similar to the age of mtDNA L3, right? Because when E and D split, you're going to have your E lineages, which a lot of your Japanese have E. So that means wherever they split, the D traveled all the way over here. The D. From here, the D, which L3 is about the same age as D and E. The D split and it went this way, and E is found in the Natufian. The E is found in the Natufian, this area. That's important to understand. So, and remember, the Natufian, we're talking this whole area was filled, right? We're talking about Natufian time. A lot of people, they think it's just this small. It's all of this. All of this is covered with the Natufian DNA. And we're talking ancient E. Ancient E is covering all these areas. And you got to follow the history, how they got into this area and this area and all these areas. That's important to understand. But the L3 lineage, to claim that it's always been in Africa, is a false science. And you see what's going on here? So the genetics companies are selling information that's not updated and it's false science. You understand? So they're going to say it's not true because it's not in our database. Let's look at another one. Right? Here's another one from another site. Another piece of information. All right, so they're going to discredit this too? Are they going to discredit this one? Let's go down and just see what they're talking about here. So you can see what it's saying right here. In this article, we assess the possibility that MT, basically, obviously, L3 matured in Eurasia and returned to Africa as L3 lineages around 70,000 years ago. See what's going on there? Look what, and in fact, what's important to understand, that if you look at their Eurasian M and N groups and L3, they're about the same age. I mean, I talked about it before that, of course, Ham, Shem, and Japheth have their own wives. That's a split right there, M and N and L. But you can see right here, what's important to understand is just constantly talking about that Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa on these different medical sites. What's the age of this one? Let's see if I can get the information on this. 2017. So we got to understand that the information that we're bringing out, we as believers are bringing out the new information that's put out that's not being brought to the public because everyone wants to sell an out of Africa idea, which is false. Everyone's trying to sell it. Everyone's trying to make L3 African. Why are you trying to make L3 African? And look at how they're trying to say because they don't even have the update of it. They're trying to say it's no way it's that old. There's no way. There's absolutely no way you're lying. I gave them all the sources. I gave them the information. I sent them the thing. I'm like, maybe you just need this, right? Maybe you just need to update these things, right? Because this is what I'm going to tell you exactly what I said. All right, I sent them just one piece and I sent more later. It says, are you saying that this report is false, right? Based on the age of L3, right? From which all obviously maternal, Euro-Asian, and majority of African lineages originated, right? It says, this is important. It says that out of Africa event has been dated around 60 to 70 KYA. On the opposite side, we have proposed a northern route through Central Asia across the Levant for that expansion. Consistent with the fossil record, we have dated around. Because why is it fossil record? Because they're there. They know where they are, and that's what the report was. When I probably flew by that. Let me open up that one real fast on L3, right? 2014. This is important. This is a very important report that was reported about this event, right? And it's talking about the pre-pottery Neolithic B because all these that were found that time. That's important to understand. But remember, that's now I gotta explain this. There's two different types of dating system. There's datings of fossils. You can date a fossil, and then they date your out of Africa, your concept of out of Africa. That's important to understand, and that's what they do too. They have a system where they date the out of Africa, and then they date the fossil. I don't know why they do that. I really don't know why they do that, but the reason has to be, without a doubt, one of the most racist bias that you ever and understand eugenics is a racist bias, and that's what they use. They use a racist bias to have all these things like that. Now, watch what it says here, right? 66 skeletons from pre-pottery Neolithic B sites from Tel Halula, right? And some other sites that I'm not gonna try to pronounce. 8,700 to 6,600 BC. You see what's going on there? And they talk about what they found all there and everything and all these things. Show you something. This is also what they found. They found L3. They found L3 there. That's important to understand. That's very, very important to understand. Finding L3 outside of Levant means and older than the so-called, how they say, out of Africa. To say that they have left Africa disproves the out of Africa theory. That means they're not African. You understand? That means they're from Syria. That's important to understand. They're not African, but they're Syrian. And if you understand what Syrian, let's look up. Let's just look at something. I'm gonna show you something. The place where they're found is pinpoint accurate. You see where they're at right here? This is pinpoint accurate. Let me show you something. Let's go and talk about the biblical narrative real fast. This is very important when talk about the biblical narrative. I think truth is good, right? I keep telling people that I'm not in a camp. I'm not doing this because I'm E1, B1A or anything like that. My wife is elder. Yeah, I'm L1. But it's important to understand that from what I seen, my group is R1B. That's important to understand. So I'm doing this unbiasedly. I do this because truth is truth. Why are they lying? And did I not show that they lied? Let me show you something. Let me just think about where this is at, because this is an interesting one that I want to show here. Let me think about where it actually is real fast, because when we're thinking about this information, we need to know that there's no doubt. The information we have, there's no doubt to it. Let me just find where is that. All right, here. I know it's right up here. Yeah. All right. So let me show you something. Let me just click this and let's talk about this real fast. I'm just going to explain what's going on here. If anyone have any questions, let me know. As beloved family, I do this unbiasedly. Do you think it's fair that FamilyTree is not updating their information and they're saying they need to update their information? They're saying L3 is African. Do you think that's fair? I don't think that's fair. I think that's unfair. Now, obviously, a lot of people try to connect Abraham to here, but let's really hear the biblical narrative. Abraham left Ur, right? And where did he find his wife? This is very important because that means his wife is in one area. His wives and the lineage of the women are found in one area. Watch what happens if we look at the biblical narrative on the description of where Abraham went. We know that he went to Haran, right? He got his wife. You know that that's where the areas where we see the L3 from. That's important to understand. That it's not just from one piece of area; it's all over these areas. Not just that, but we find them also later on throughout these areas. And why are they over here? Who went down into this area? Who was found over here? Was not Egypt sent into captivity? And then they left out of Egypt and went into the wilderness and they crossed over? That's important to understand. So we find El up in the Levant in areas where we should find Israel. But let's keep on. Let's just look here. I want to show you something because I think it's important to understand the biblical narrative. Abraham got his wife from here. Isaac also was told, remember, he said, don't get a wife from anywhere up here. Go up there and get a wife for Isaac. He went up there and got a wife for Isaac. Then what happened? Jacob came, and then he had his wife up here, right? Leah and Rachel. And then he had 12 sons, right? They finally went back down, and then they settled in Egypt for a while. That's important. That's very important. That means that we can trace Israel. We can trace them. We can trace Israel for a time when they're being expanded, right? We're talking this direct lineage of people, 12 sons. It shouldn't be hard to find such a group like 12 sons like that. And it's important to understand we have to find their women. Now, I already brought out a bunch of information, different pieces of information to show that indeed, the E lineage has high connections to being Shemites. There's no doubt. But this L lineage is taking a heat. I'm talking about a heat, and I'm saying a heat because the information that's being provided by our trusted, quote unquote, our trusted DNA experts. Many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. So, what do you think about this when they're saying this haplogroup dates approximately to 50,000 years ago and its detected proximity is sub-equatorial Africa? They're trying to say that it's always been in Africa 50,000 years ago? Are they so this report? Well, I'm just gonna go up to the top so you can see. Do they all agree? So remember, this is also the reason why they're dating all weird and stuff like that. I can't really tell you exactly why it's the most silliest system. I'm telling you, the biblical narrative is truth. If we take the biblical narrative, and I can show you a chart and just take Adam's age all the way to Abraham, that's 2,000 years. From Abraham to Messiah, that's 2,000 years. From Messiah to us, that's 2,000 years. If you take the biblical narrative, that's what it is. They're designing their own time frames. I kid you not, they're designing their own time frames. I could show you an article where they themselves admit that the out of Africa theory has no scientific backing. No scientific backing. And this is an example of that. This is an example of that because the information that they're withholding from the public. You understand? They're withholding it from the public so the public has a false narrative so that those who say the truth are found to be hated because they're speaking the truth. Understand, I'm unbiased. I'm not on anyone's side, but I believe in truth. And I found out that E1, B1A, and the L lineages are the lineages of the Israelites. That's important to understand. And that there is a false eugenics going on. And a lot of people who say they don't talk genetics, where they're talking eugenics because the people were white or they say the people were black. And if they're not looking at genetics, they're speaking eugenics. Eugenics is a racist form of science and it does not prove anything. Eugenics is based on skin color. Pigmentation is not a representation of a peopling. Pigmentation is found in all types of people. I can show you so many different types of lineages from J, from E, from R, from all types of groups with different colors. The life is in the blood. And if we're not gonna, if the people who are bringing out the genetic information are not going to be honest and update their information, they need to stop collecting money and selling people lies. That's what they're doing. They're selling people lies so that when somebody who is actually from Syria looks and see that they're L3, they're like, well, I must always been in Africa. There can't be no way that I'm Israelite. There's no way. Because FamilyTree says I'm not. Many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. Or earlier. That means there could be information in their system that's so backwards. And how many companies you think is like this? How many companies you think is in agreement doing the same agreements like this? How many companies you think are actually doing this? All right, so I'm gonna read you something. Nothing's certain at the moment. All right, because obviously I let them know. I said, you saying this is false? And saying nothing's certain at the moment. Okay, you got 2010 information. Nothing's certain at the moment. It looks like this paper is speculating that those fossils must have been L3NE. Remember how now this is what I keep talking about. When doing genetics, you gotta note what's speculation. For example, I was just talking to someone today, and they pulled out something for Jay, and they say he had a paper. I could pull up the same paper and talk about how they was making the assumption that it's found somewhere in the Levant, Middle East, or such and such. Where somewhere? Is it fossils? Are you saying somewhere as it is found? No, they're saying somewhere as in hoping. Understand, if you want to look at fossils, we got to look at the fossil record. See what it's saying there? That those fossils must have been L3. They're saying it looks like this paper is speculating that those fossils must have been L3 and E because those haplogroups migrated out of Africa. No, that's not what the paper's saying. And into the Levant. No, that's not what the paper. Why are you looking at the paper and reading it wrong? They scanned through the paper. I kid you not. I sent them information and they were answering me like that. They weren't looking at the paper. They weren't looking at the paper. They were just saying what they wanted to say and just scan through. Information specialists. But there's no testing done on the remains. There's no testing done on the remains. That's one of those things that you're trying to say that the fossils that were found confirmed by multiple genetic sites. Multiple. You're trying to say there's no testing on the fossils. I don't think they're looking at the information. They need to look directly at the information and actually link that with understanding what the reports are saying. Actually see the mtDNA sequencing. Actually look at what they're doing when they're doing this work. They're not just saying this. Not all these reports are coming out in agreement, just agreeing to nothing. It's found. That's one of the biggest things that I think is so important, that when these things were found, when they actually found these things, right, within this context, ancient DNA studies have provided a more reliable picture by directly analyzing, right, these populations at different regions in Europe. This is important to understand. When they're looking at these genetics and everything, and then they're pulling up, they got the thing when they're talking about where they're from and everything. When they're looking at these things, you got to look at the details. You got to look at the actual details and see if that's what they found. They did. That's what they found there. They found that there. That's important to understand. And it's not just one place. It's not just in one place. It's confirmed that that's where they are. That's just where they are. Right? That's and what's important to understand when you're looking at this information, remember they date them twice. They date the fossil, and that's why you'll see sometimes dates like this, and you'll see those enormous dates like 6,000 or 60,000, and they know for a fact. Understand, when you look at history and texts of history, recorded history only goes back. Recorded history, actual real history, especially when we think about the biblical narrative, when they got off of the boat, When Noah's flood was done, they got off the boat. History don't go past 3000 BC. It don't. Anything you see past 3000 BC, they're exaggerating. Understand that. They're exaggerating history. And that's why you'll see things where they say, "Oh, it's not that old. It's not that old." And then they'll say, "Oh, it is that old." They'll backtrack. You see what I'm saying? And that's what FamilyTree is doing. It's saying, "Oh, it's not that old." And let's keep going. I'm gonna read on a little more on this. So remember, they're analyzing it. They're looking at they're looking at the genetics themselves, right? They're directly analyzing it. So you can see what they're saying, where they're going, right? Nothing certain, speculation. They try to say that those are L3 and E. It says obviously E is up there if you know about the Natufian genetics, and a lot of other ones that were around the area, right? In the pre-pottery Neolithic B. Just look at pre-pottery Neolithic B, and you'll see the haplogroups, the types of genetics that were found in Levant. They say migrated out of Africa into the Levant, but there is no actual testing done on the remains. Okay. However, some part of the article did sound familiar to one of the few looking into this. For example, regarding the sentence about the skeletal remains indirecting early modern humans being present in the Levant between, obviously, you see what they're saying there. The person they're looking into the paper. They're looking into the paper, and they're just saying, "Oh, this looks familiar. This looks familiar for early humans between what I just sent them, what these papers are saying. They're saying the same. They're saying the same thing. They're all saying the same piece of information that this is that group right here, where you can see right here, several archaeological studies uncovered Middle Stone Age, and you can see they say dated around. You can see what they put in there. You can see it dating around 1000 or 125 to 70 KYA. Okay, but remember, this is the same study, about L3, the same study, the same one. They're all in agreement. They all in agreement that they have dated outside of Africa. So he's saying, "Oh, it looks familiar." They mentioned that they recall that being real. They mentioned that they recall that being real. Oh, I bet it is real. I bet it is real. I bet it is real. I bet we found Israel. However, it's been a while since they looked into the classification of those cave fossil remains. They just admitted that it was fossils. They just admitted in the same message where they're saying that's speculation that those were fossils. You see what I'm saying here? You see what's going on here? This is very important to understand. This is why I'm looking into this, because I'm telling you the evidence is there. The evidence is there. They're just not bringing it out. We're going to bring it out because it has to be brought out. Because everyone's trying to link everybody into some little group and stuff like that. But there are some people looking into this thing unbiasedly, looking into the truth. Other DNA scholars have speculated that there was more than one migration out of Africa. What does that mean? However, all non-African Africans today descend from a single migration out of Africa 30 to 60,000 years ago. Okay, you probably need to update your information. No, they of course that doesn't answer any of those questions. That did that answer any of those questions? I just gave them some more sources. They didn't say nothing. I just gave them some more sources about different things, and hopefully they're looking at that because they need to update their information. In fact, I told them, you know what might happen? I might take this to court. I might take this to court. You understand what I'm saying? I myself might take this to court. I might take this to court because it's racism. It's racism, and it's hiding information. It's racism because it's deceiving people, and it's eugenics. That's what it actually is. It's really the remains of eugenics. That's what this is. This is the back remains of what eugenics had did by placing people who are darker skinned into one group. They need to update their information. They need to update their information. So things like this, when you see things like this, understand on the web, it may be hard to find the truth sometimes, but I'm telling you the truth is there. Long as you look very closely. Remember, this person based on a bill from 2009. This is not 2019. This is not 2021. This is 2009 when they put this out. And they just confirmed that Many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. Do you think that this is fair? Do you think that a company with such responsibility over genetics should not update their information on that haplogroup? I think that they need to update their information, or I'm gonna. This one of those things that truly, family, truly, this video right here is a witness. This is a witness that we do this unbiasedly, and that they are liars. They just tried to lie in their own statement and then confirm that it was fossils, right? And the person said he remembers that being real. I recall that being real. But it's been a while since I looked into that. However, it's been a while since they looked into the classification of those cave fossil remains. Oh yeah, they recall it being real, but it's been a while since they looked into those cave fossil remains. They remember that. They remember L3 and E talking about. Oh wait, I remember that paper that said L3 and E was actually outside of Africa. It was not actually in Africa, but it migrated into Africa. I remember that. I remember it being real. Wait, it's been a while since I looked into those fossil remains. It's been a while. Therefore, it's just speculation. What? So, based on their lack of information, based on their lack of actually putting in the work to look at the information, they themselves call it speculation. You see what I'm saying here? I would really want this to sink down in every brother and sister. I really want brothers to sink down in this, and I want the most strongest brothers in genetics to build harder, build more, eat everything I have, take it all. Everything I have is yours. Every single thing. If you got to upload videos, little pieces, maybe you can make something a little more refined. Maybe you can do something a little better to me. Maybe you can do something better. I'm just bringing the stuff out. I just want you to see this stuff. And my beloved brothers, a lot of them are E1B1B, and a lot of them are the L lineage, and a lot of them are R. A lot of them are different groups. A lot of them speak a lot of wisdom, like this brother right here, Haya. He says, "Be praised." He speaks a lot of knowledge that's important, and this is the type of stuff that we need to see. We need to see more brothers bring this stuff out because this is truth. What you're seeing here, you're seeing single-handedly. You're seeing single-handedly that FamilyTree DNA, as other genetic sites, are in agreement to lie. Many of our haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. Let me show you something. Now I got to open something. That just fired me up to open something. I'm off today, so I don't know if this is gonna be a short live, blood family. This struck my heart. It struck my heart to see such a thing like that. It struck my heart to see that Israel isn't not just captivity, but being lied to, and it's the simplest information. It's no doubt about this information. There's no doubt. There's that this information is true. But let me show you something. I'm going to show you something that I brought up before because I knew the biblical narrative is true, that Ham, Shem, and Japheth were in different areas, that there was no people. Let me show you something. They're trying to say everyone began as Hamites, right? Let's say that A in the Y DNA, A and B is Hamites. Understand that. Let's just say everyone. He said in the beginning, everyone started out as a Hamite. It's a lie, family. I'm telling you that they're lying. They're trying to spread a lie. I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to show you this because I want the lions to stand forth in truth. I want the real Israel to stand forth. Not just the. And I want Israel to know that there are some people that may not be the same genetics, but they do believe the truth. Right? And that's what a lot of brothers we have believe in this truth. I'm telling you. And I'm gonna bring it out like fire, family. I thought I was bringing out a little bit. I thought I was doing something a little bit, but it's gonna be more serious. I might have to cut this into like little 10 minutes animations or something to understand what's going on here, because I'm gonna show you that the outer Africa idea. I'm gonna show you something on this. In fact, I use this to search. Let me show you something. Watch this. Watch what they say about the outer Africa idea. This is a genetic report. This is a genetic report. This is what they say. Apparently, They were too much focusing at bending the data to fit out of Africa. Let me show you something. I'm gonna go up. This is a genetic report that came out 2014. If someone wants to try to say it's not true, they need to go to the credentials of it and tell these people if their information is not true, talk to them. As these here are going to be a university, a genetic university, and this science research is going to be all sourced. Everything that you see here is sourced. And they talk about this. They talk about this is very important. I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about what's going on here. This is a very, very important PDF. It's a very, very important PDF. It's basically reconstruction of the out of Africa concept as not having enough proof. As not having enough proof. It has not enough proof. There's not enough proof for it. And I already did a large video on it and everything and talked about these things. But on this video today, I just want to focus on L3. I just want to talk about L3 and talk about how L3 itself is actually going to be a lineage that was found up in Syria. It was found outside of Africa. It was found outside of it. But I wanted to show you that they were bending data. Now, I'm just for the sake of this video, I don't know, I'm not gonna look for this thing right now. I just want to show that one part how they were bending data. I can go deeper into that, but there's a video I did directly on how out of Africa is false. You'll see it is on the Synthetic Sunday playlist. This is gonna be on that playlist. But let me show you something. Let me just show you something real fast over here. Let me show you something. Let me just think about what it is. Sometimes I get caught in train of thought, but I want to show you something real fast. Okay, here it is. I wanted to show you. Close this. I wanted to show you just the information on L3. I just want to show you the information on L3 that we found. Where we find in the Tufian DNA. You see this name right here? I'm going to show you something real fast. But before I show you that, I just want to show you on the map. Here's a map right here, a little idea of where these things are pointing. I'm going to open this so it's clear to see. I'm going to show you here what you're seeing here. Shalom, family. Shalom. You see what you're seeing here? You see Syria right here? Note this is Syria. I'm going to show you something that's going to blow your mind. Now, this is important to understand. The Natufians have a different, yes, the Natufians have a different mother Y chromosome in a certain time frame. The Natufians then get a certain line of females that we're going to talk about up here, which is going to be the L lineage. And we're going to talk about that when that time frame comes. And why is that important? That only one group has that L lineage, because the L lineage is actually rare. But before we talk about it, let's talk about the time frames first. First, you have your late, they call it your late Natufian. Basically, when a Natufian is the earliest you find them, is their late after you see the. So you can see a little information on it. You can see how it looks. You see all this. Where was Abraham? Came from these areas, right? He settled down here. You can see what's going on there. His family was up there. You can see his family would be up here. We're going to look at the genetics here and we're going to see some things. It's very important. It's not pottery and highlight already. Skeletal remains belonging to pre-pottery Neolithic B, right? It says, as have the mtDNA clads L3 and K. L3 is the one we want to look at. Why? Because L3 is extremely rare. You can look it up yourself and they'll admit to you L3 is extremely rare. In fact, when the report first came out about this location, about the genetic finds, I'm going to close some of these things so we don't have too much open real fast. So about the genetic finds that were found here in this area, a lot of the information didn't come out when the publishing came out in 2008 or 2005, but no, 2008 right there. But it came out in 2014. I'm gonna read you something here. Sorry if I butcher some of these names. Eva, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. Let me make sure I mention something about this because this is very important about this video. Remember how I showed you that when this information came out, they actually understand this when I say this. When this information came out in 2005, The results in 2008 didn't have the same results as 2014 because they hid the information. Listen to me when I say this. This is why it's interesting that FamilyTree DNA is saying that they haven't updated their information since 2010, because in 2008, they only brought out one of those groups that they found. They didn't bring out all the information. But when 2014 came around, they brought out everything that was actually in the publication. That's what they actually released. They released everything in 2014, and they haven't updated their information since 2010.
Extracted samples of basically mtDNA, or the female line DNA, from human bones, from, I don't know how you pronounce that, Tel Halula, or that area right here. Let's look at a map. I'm going to show you on the map where it is. Right here, right above Syria. See where it's right here? And where was Abraham? Where did Abraham go? He got his wives. He got them from up here, right? He didn't get them from here. He didn't get them from anywhere else, but he got them from here, right? Let's take a look here. Let's keep on going. Watch what it says here. So L3 is actually found in the Levant. Watch what happens here. It says, as part of the studies for her PhD thesis, accepted at university and whatnot, and all this. I'm going to go down and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to jump right here and read you something. So basically, long story short, is basically her publication, when it was first published in 2008, it didn't have everything as it had in the publication in 2014. Long story short. Watch what it says here. In the latter publication, I'm going to show you where that's also recorded, where this is actually recorded. This is their information on these things. In the latter publication, the MT haplogroups were given as U, R, O, K, H, V, H, N, and L3. Now let's take a look at L3 real fast. We don't even need to look it up, because you can look it up yourself and find out L3 is very rare. Is a very rare haplotype, but we can actually find it in your common, how they say, that's right here, frequencies, profiles of major haplogroups in Africa and haplogroups in recent African ancestries, right? Remember to careful with the word Africa. Remember where that word came from, right? The sons of Abraham of Keturah came down into Africa and named it Africa when they took the land of Libya. Now notice right here, L3. These are going to be your E1B1 that goes, your E1B1A that went into Canada, your E1B1A in America. Let's say, in fact, let me open up this so we can zoom in on this of your L3. This is your L3. This is the line. Now let's go up a little bit and let's continue reading. I want to show you something, because I want to show you that this information also that I'm giving you here is going to be very interesting. And yeah, it was found in the land of.
So this video, if you haven't seen it, I put a timestamp. There. Let's see, where is that? Right here. You just click that timestamp, it'll get right to that part where I talked about, and it just talks about L3. But I want to show a little bit of that because I think it's important when connecting the whole thing of L3. I'm gonna close this. And now I'm going to show you when me and Will had touched on this. I brought out some sources, he brought out some. So we have multiple different sources at once of this thing that's no doubt. There's no doubt about what's going on there.
2014, that's when they find out the truth. 2014 is when they find out the truth. So remember, 2014. And then it just talks about them, obviously December, right? December. And then going on all the way to January, December. Watch what it says.
That night, he says the same thing. The 10 tribes were beyond the rivers of Ethiopia.
Now, I want to talk about something real fast, because this one I had to look for it. I don't know exactly where it's at. I think it's either early in it, but this is where I also talk about L3 right here. So you can see it's a little early right here where we go. We both bring out some sources on L3, and I'm just gonna put it here because I'm gonna have this video here to reflect back on that. We touched on L3. There's a lot of different sources on L3, and you got companies like FamilyTree DNA that would say one thing, right? You see how they try to deny that the papers, right? They tried to deny it. I just want you to see that this is truth. What I'm telling you is that they say they recall, right? That they recall that being real, those papers. However, it's been a while since they looked at it. Even those fossil remains. You know why? Because they haven't updated information since 2010, right? They haven't looked into these things. They haven't put these things down. Maybe they did look at them, but maybe they just didn't put them down. So apparently, some of them know about this thing, but a lot of them are in agreement with what the world wants things to be. We don't follow the world; we follow truth.
It's something totally different.
That's right.
So what we're saying is we never was in Africa. We came from the Middle East, the Levant, Israel, and we went into Africa. That's what we are saying.
That's right. And if anyone's questioning that, if you believe in the word, you already know that the Euphrates River has been talked about throughout all history and it never left the Middle East, as that's the promised land that's given to Abraham from the river of Egypt to the river of the Euphrates.
Facts. So going to continue on to the next study. It's called Carriers of Mitochondrial DNA, Macrohaplogroup L3, Basic Lineages, Back Migration into Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. All right, remember, the Bible does not agree with people or all the sons of Noah migrating out of Africa. All right, and correct me if I'm wrong. L3 would be our women's, majority of our women, right?
Yep, L3 would actually be the Shemitic line, the direct one that was found in Syria.
All right, so we about to dig into that. It says the split of Y chromosome composite DE haplogroup is very similar to the age of mtDNA L3. A Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome haplogroup E. All right, so we keep saying that this haplogroup is outside of Africa. Inside Africa, frequency distributions of material L3 and paternal E lineages are positively correlated. All right, so that's basically letting us know that they migrated together.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. We have two Semitic branches migrating together. Where are they coming from? It says this correlation is not fully explained by geographical or ethnic affinities. It seems better to be the result of a joint and global replacement of old autochthonous male and female African lineage by the new Eurasian incomers.
That's something.
That's definitely something. That's letting us know that all the old, right, African lineages were wiped out or taken over or substituted by the male and female African lineages. I mean, by the male and female lineages of Asian incomers. All right.
That's
Those
right.
so-called Eurasian incomers would be those possessing haplogroup E and L3. So that's very important.
That's right. And also to expand on that, what's also interesting, how it's also important to know for some things that they don't want to be true, they also use terms of in the sense of trying to say it's speculation.
Mhm.
But it's also important to know how can you find a solid piece of information to know that that's what we're actually looking at. Are we actually ensuring that we're looking at some real genetics of ancient peoples in that time? And it's also important to know we do have information of that L3 directly. And that's what's important to know. What's speculation and what is solid fact? What do we have solid fact of? And we do have a very interesting quote. I want to actually show you this real fast because this quote is actually fairly interesting. Just let me know when you show.
You up?
All right, so I want to read you something about the ancient DNA that's found in the Levant because that's actually talking about the female line now. So just to get a little idea on there, that was this person, basically, long story short, she basically had a find that she found and she hid it. I'm just going to tell you the truth, that she actually hid the truth. And not just her, but someone hid it. Someone hid the publication when it was first published in 2008. And if you ever see any quotes that say the L lineage never left Africa or things like that, it's because the information for L3, you got to look after 2014. Because after it says right here, so, and this is on this right here. And if you also want this, I'll get this to Will if you want pretty much some of these things on these things, the sources and stuff. Right here, watch what it says here. It just says, so a first publication of the results in 2008 was corrected. It said it was corrected because they was basically talking about, long story short, they didn't bring out all the lineages because what they first showed was one lineage, but it actually had other lineages. And the reason why is it was controversial because there's one lineage that they were trying to sell as part of the out of Africa idea, which is the L3 lineage. But you're going to see right here, it says in the latter publication of MT haplogroups were given as U, R, O, K, H, V, H, N, and L3. Now, what's interesting is that this location is in this place called, as you see right here, Tel Halula. That's actually important to know where that is. If you look on a map, you actually will see that would be up in this area up here. So you actually will see it basically on Syria, pretty much. In fact, I don't know why this thing is moving so fast, but I'm gonna click right here, maybe get right to it. So right here, you can see it's actually one of the major areas where you find Natufian genetics. And these areas where you see you see this Euphrates. And remember, the scripture actually talks about this is where Abraham's family was. Abraham's family was up here. Remember, he told the person who was with him, he said, "Don't get a wife for my son from the land of Canaan, which I dwell." He said, go back to his homeland where his family is. And that's where his family was. So that's where we find that L3, just to show you the exact pinpoint right above Syria. And remember, a word for word tells us that the women were from, where they was reigning in Syria. So right there where Syria is, right where the Euphrates is, that's where they found that L3, just to have a solid piece. And that's ancient genetics. What's also important, this don't tell you the time, but they also tested the time to tell you the time. And I'll just quickly tell you that real fast. And also that back migration and everything that was talked about. Just know that the L3, that's the oldest place that is found is in the Levant. Just right here, you can see it's they talk about based on the age, basically of L3, from which it says from which all basically what's that? Basically maternal, Euro-Asian, and the majority of African lineages originated. Now it's let us know that they say your Asian and your so-called African lineages originated because L3 is going to be where you see most Israel. You're going to find that mostly in them. You can actually see right here that out of Africa, watch what it says here, that out of Africa event has been dated around. So when was the out of Africa event in their chart? It says about 60 to 70,000 years ago. Why? Why did they say it's only 60 to 70,000 years ago? Why do they want it to be around there? Because they don't want the Europeans to be African. They don't want them to have to been in Africa, but they want them to be like people that are always been in Europe, and the Africans are a lower people that was just never up there. But what they found out with L3, it says on the opposite side, we had proposed a northern route throughout Central Asia across the Levant for that expansion. What it's talking about for L3, it actually doesn't date to around that time. It actually says that even older than what they trying to date it to. They say right here, it says it's consistent with fossil records. We have dated it around, they say 125 basically 1,000 years ago. Now, what's important about that shows that in their model, it wouldn't fit with their out of Africa idea. It went because they also found it in the Levant. That's what's important to note too. They didn't find it in Africa. They found it in the Levant. That's what makes it important. And that is older than their time frame. So that means it was solid in the Levant. That's what it means. That's basically what that means. If anyone ever says like L3, this thing or that, it just basically says it ends like this. To help bridge differences between the molecular and fossil record ages, in this article, they just talk about, testing those things and whatnot. And then they also talk about how L3 matured in Eurasia and returned to Africa in basic L3 lineages around 70 KYA. So it came to Africa. So that's actually the solid piece instead of the hype, the thinking, but actually the solid piece.
And the key note is majority of our women are L3, L2. So there you go.
Amen. You finna expound? I don't know if you already finna expound on how the E lineage is also related or linked with the L lineage.
Somewhat. It's going to get into that somewhat. If not, you can go more into it, brother.
All right. I'm gonna expound and then I'm gonna let it see what's gonna happen because it most likely gonna expound on this. But let me show you also with that L. This is how we know the L lineage was part with the lineage with the people, because remember, he was just reading. You see that word? How do you say that? I never can
Yeah,
pronounce this word.
me either. Yeah,
Yeah,
autonomous. Maybe.
autonomous. Even when I put it in the thing and try to listen to it, autonomous is whatever. That sounds good. I like how that sounds. But it just talks about right here. Long story short, you can find it in multiple quotes with these things. Remember, I was talking about that one in 1,025 years ago. It says, E carrying males are thus proposed to have back migrated from the pretty much the father's haplogroup place of origin. So where's his place of origin? Levant. The Levant is the place of origin. Place of origin in Eurasia around 70 KYA. So they're saying that they came to Africa, along with females bearing the female line of haplogroup, right? mtDNA, L3. So he's saying the E and the L was moving together. They were together the whole time, which the study also, they this one has an idea to have originated in Europe, Eurasia. Now, obviously, that's what we're going to look at today, because we already saw we solidly confirmed that L3 is from the Levant. You can also see that E is also from the Levant. It's confirmed with ancient genetics. You can see these new Eurasian lineages were then suggested to have largely replaced the autosynonymous male and female African lineages. Now, remember, the definition of some of these words is important. It's more about the definition than the word. This actually means that the people from Eurasia replaced the indigenous rather than descended from migrants and colonists. They replaced the original inhabitants of Africa. And what lineages did the original inhabitants of Africa have?
Mm-hmm.
It says we can look at that in different places too. Traces of early inhabitants, however, can be observed today in these regions via the presence of the Y-DNA haplogroups A1A, A1B, A2, A3, and BM60. That's not, none of that is the E lineage, and you can find that in a certain groupings. And that's none of those are the E lineage, but those are going to be the original inhabitants of Africa. Those are going to be the original inhabitants of Africa. Also, those are going to be some of your, that's right, original Hamites. Also, we know that they're original Hamites because we also can find them in the land of Sidon. If you look in the land of Sidon, you see your A and B lineages. You see A's and B's in the land of Sidon, which was the land that was owned by the Canaanites. Also with the invasion of the Sea peoples, which had predominantly J that came down there. So you can see also the J that came into the land of Sidon. So there's actually ancient Sidon early on, looking at the digs in Sidon.
So we talked about this, and understand I'm constantly talking to FamilyTree DNA. I'm constantly sending information to FamilyTree DNA, and I want to show you now. We know without a doubt. In fact, I'm gonna show you FamilyTree DNA even knows that E has a back migration. In that same video, I talked about it, but I'm just gonna bring it right here real fast and just point it out how FamilyTree DNA knows this stuff is true, right? And remember, I'm not doing this because I'm biased, right? I may have more of a zeal now that my wife is L3, and I definitely am offended to see that the information is not being updated. I'm offended to see that they're bunching the people together and making them all one based on eugenics, based on skin color. Now we know that Israel is mainly dark skinned. I got plenty of evidence how Israel is mainly dark skinned, right? We got multiple pieces of evidence. Just for curiosity, I had did a live earlier on I forgot what page it was. I don't know what it was. My spirit got rattled up, and I was like, I'm gonna hop in this thing and just give some correction to this individual that seems like he thinks he know what he's talking about. I seen that Sister E had basically put him in his place with a question. He could not answer it. He thought that no one was paying attention, that he was dodging such a question. It was a very easy question, but it's not even on this note. But let me think about this one. In fact, let me grab it. I actually know where it's at. I want to talk about two things on this note. Two things. I want to talk about how we know that the children that went to San Tome and everything, that one we already know, right? The children that went to San Tome, if they were, now understand when I say this, they try to say there's no T. Listen to me when I say this. This is how you know when someone knows genetics. Just because they say there's no T and J there does not mean that the Jews did not go there. In fact, that's against them because we know the Jews went there. In fact, There is no female lineage of the main lineage of the Ashkenazi female lineage. The main lineage of the Ashkenazi female lineage. You can look at it yourself. The main female lineage, if the Jews went to that island, why is there not one lineage that's there that's going to be the Jewish group? Because remember, that's who filled that island. They were there for a long time. But they have L0, L1, L2, L3, and L4. And they got this H, and we know that that's connected with the R lineages that came down there. It's even talked on the paper that the European lineages came down there. It's one of those things that we know is true. But let me show you something. Not just that, I want to show you something here. Sometimes I almost lose my train of thought, but I want to show you something. In fact, it's not on this. I want to show you it on another note. I got to open it up. The reason why I want to show you this is because there's a quote by Tacitus. He makes a statement, and a lot of people scan through one of the statements there and think that no one knows the answer to it. But I want to show you something. The reason why I want to show you this is because I want to show you the real answer to this statement. It's very important that the whole saying of Tacitus is understood. And I'm going to show you with history. I'm going to show you with history. So Tacitus already broke it down that many of the Minoans, that was darker skinned people there that had almost like a purple tone to them, they became the Phoenicians. We know that because the genetics are all there. We know this, even the J's in certain groups, and in a connection of that. And then that SLC 45A2 with the darker skin that they had, but they were still European. That's why when Tacitus wrote and said, some say that the Jews were fugitives from the islands of Crete. Talk about the fugitives there, because that's who was in that picture, was that one that's called, you can look it up, the Captain of the Blacks. The Captain of the Blacks. It's a Minoan piece of art called the Captain of the Blacks, right? This is important to know so that you don't get, no one takes you with this. When you see Minoans like this, dark skin like this, they're not actually dark skinned. That's a copy that the Egyptians were doing. It's just a little thing with that. But understand this, that there is evidence of black skinned people being there. That's what the Captain of the Blacks is. The Captain of the Blacks is evidence of that. But let's go up, and I'm going to show you this piece. Not that, but you see where it says, many again say they were a race. That's not to be confused. Race. Can an Ethiopian change their skin? No. A race of Ethiopian origin. And then look at this part right here. Let me read you this part right here where it says, others describe them as an Assyrian horde. If someone cuts off right there, then they don't know what's going on. Let me read the whole thing, because the whole quote is important to understand. Others describe them as an Assyrian horde who, not having significant territory, this is important, that means we got to find a group that doesn't have a lot of room, they're so expanded, they don't have a lot of room, took possession of part of Egypt. You got to find a group that's so large, they also took possession of Egypt and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country. What is the Hebrew country? The Levant. So you got to find them in Egypt. You got to find them in the territory of the Levant. You got to also find them laying on the border of Syria. Let's see what are they talking about? History actually proves who they're talking about. Let me show you something in history, what it's talking about here. I just want to show you this because this is very important. I'm just going to give it to you while I'm going to it. It is no doubt that during the Bronze Age collapse, Assyria was conquered by the Arabs. Assyria later started to do a displacement policy of displacing people. You know what one of the major groups they were displacing? The Arabs. What did the Arabs look like? We already live on that, on what the Arabs look like. But let me show you something, how it's said. That's important to understand. It's comparing them to Arabs. That's what it's doing. It's comparing it's comparing the Israelites to Arabs. That's what it's actually doing here. Let me just make sure this is the right one I want to go to here. Yeah. All right, let me show you something.
Reintroduced a policy of mass deportation and forced population movement. In 744, for example, Tiglath-Pileser decreed that 65,000 people were to be taken from their homes in Iran and settled on the Assyrian-Babylonian border on the Diyala River. 2 years later, 30,000 people from the Syrian region were deported to the Zagros Mountains. Those human beings who were deported were usually people considered most likely to rebel against Assyria. By decapitating possibly dissident elements in this way, it was hoped that subjugated lands would remain amenable to their Assyrian overlords and remain subjugated. To top it off, deportation allowed the Assyrians to transport people with valuable skills such as administration, construction, and financial management across the empire to where they were most needed. Within his empire, Tiglath-Pileser also acted decisively to ensure that central rule would never again be challenged and undermined as it had been in the age of Magna.
So
To do this, he took the provinces of...
This is one piece. I'm going to show you another one in connection, because I was going to bring this out this Sunday. I was going to talk about this little piece of information, but I'm going to go and show you this. 1914. Let me show you something. All right, I'm going to show you the details of who was actually being replaced. Who was they displacing? What people were they actually displacing? I'm going to show you. We got to look at the history so we're not guessing. Because remember, and not just this, let me just also show you that this is what we're looking at. Let me show you something in the Natufian. You just go to the Natufian and go to a picture of the Natufian map right here. So we know that the Natufian, remember what that saying said? Let me go back to that saying so you can hear the whole thing of the saying. Watch what it says here. Others describe them as an Assyrian horde who, not having significant territory. That means that they are a very large, massive group. That's what we see here. Very large, massive group. And what else did they have? That very large, massive group. We got to look at this very carefully, right? Not having significant territory, took possession of part of Egypt. That's what we remember. We looked at the Orphrene. Him and the Midianites, they took Orphrene and they settled over here in Libya. And remember, all of Libya is up here. All of this is Libya. All of this in ancient time was called Libya. It's important to understand. So they had took all of Africa. They took that upper area in Egypt and everything. You see what's going there? Possession part of Egypt, and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country, right? Lying on the borders of Syria, right? And that's what we see when we look at those genetics. But let me show you something who they displace. I'm going to show you exactly who they displace here.
Years after Tiglath-Pileser I's death, Assyria went through another period of gradual and then severe decline. By around 1000 BCE, the Assyrian state had lost so much territory, especially to the Aramaeans, that the kingdom had been reduced to little more than a sliver of land along the Tigris River. Assyria didn't suffer alone. The Aramaeans were causing havoc for nearly everyone, including the kingdoms that now made up Babylonia. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. If you've made it this far in the program, then you've seen the ups and downs that the Assyrian state went through over a span of roughly 1,000 years. You've also become acquainted with some of its great early kings, such as Shamshi-Adad I, Tukulti-Ninurta I, Ashurbanipal, and Tiglath-Pileser I, who set the stage for what we call tales of the legendary warrior queen Semiramis, probably had a part in maintaining power for her son. Who was likely the inspiration for the tales of the legendary warrior queen Semiramis, probably had a part in maintaining power for her son. However, Adad-Nirari III's reign was the exception. Most of the other kings during this time were considered to be quite weak. It seemed that Assyria was destined to go into rapid decline again until a new king, Tiglath-Pileser III, seized the throne in 745 BCE. Fed up of all of the divisive politics, he clamped down on the power of the magnates and took a more ruthless approach towards his enemies, both foreign and domestic. All who opposed him, if they didn't surrender, were brutally dealt with. Any civilian survivors of his campaigns were deported from their homelands and resettled in other, distant regions. In their place, new settlers from Assyria moved into their homes and occupied what remained of their cities. A good number, if not the majority of these deported peoples, were Aramaean speakers. According to Eckhart Fromm, professor of Near Eastern languages and civilizations at Yale University, the aim of these deportations was, and I quote, to destroy the identity of the colonized polities and thus reduce the potential for armed resistance, and to enable the Assyrian king to send large numbers of laborers wherever they were most needed, whether in underdeveloped provinces to do agricultural work, or in the Assyrian capital cities to participate in large construction projects.
What does this sound like? Do you know that I'm going to bring something out next Synthetic Sunday? I'm going to show you that the Assyrians, the Armenians, the Ashkenazis are the same. I'm going to show you that they're exactly the same. I'm going to show you without a doubt. I'm going to show you without a doubt. But first, let's understand this. This is what they did. They deported people. They sent them into captivity and made them lose who they were. They were making people lose who they were and sent them into captivity to labor in places. Doesn't that sound familiar? Send them into captivity, making them forget who they are. This is very important. That's why they were sending people in places they may never have been before. Doesn't that sound really familiar? Doesn't that sound like something that's very familiar? Sending large number of laborers wherever they were most needed. Doesn't that sound very familiar? Doesn't that sound familiar with the colonized, all these things? Does that sound like a familiar practice? Something that has been going on for a long time, a practice that's been going on for a long time. But remember, you seen what they said? Who was the major group that was sent there? One more time.
And thus reduce the potential for armed resistance, and to enable the Assyrian king to send large numbers of languages and civilizations at Yale University. The aim of these deportations was, and I quote, settlers from Assyria moved into their homes and occupied what remained of their cities. A good number, if not the majority of these deported peoples, were Aramaean speakers.
So the answer to that whole phrase, that's important to understand that when others that were described as Assyrian horde, that was the Aramaeans, a lot of Aramaeans, and that's why he's following their linguistics. The Aramaeans were sent around. That's important. That's even when we see the genetics, right? There was Egypt, they had a lot of area. A lot of times their border was at Syria, except the ones that went far up. A lot of E1B1B ancient times went very high up all over the world. That's massive, right? Israel wasn't that massive. Israel wasn't that massive in ancient times. Israel was very small. Israel was here. We talk about Abraham going here, and then he went, and then the time passed for him. Then Isaac, right? He got his wife from here, right? So Abraham came here, slept here. Then Isaac got his wife, slept there, and then Jacob got his wives, and then they went down. And then remember the time of Joseph, they went down into Egypt. How long were they in Egypt at this time? For a long time. Israel was in Egypt for a long time. So Israel being in Egypt, being called out, going through the wilderness, going up and being over here. So Israel's accounted for. We can account for Israel. But if we start looking at more of the Arabian lineages, then we can see larger numbers, larger groups and those things. That's important to understand because the Bronze Age collapsed. They went up there and they conquered the Hittites and stuff like that. And they went over here, and that's where we find EM38. EM38 is over here. Was Israel over here in ancient times? No. Israel wasn't over there in ancient times. But Israel itself was over here. So E1B1B is not the same as E1B1A, just to get that straight. But E1B1B is also can be grafted in by the gospel. That's important to understand. But E1B1A is Israelites. How do we also know that they're Israelites? Like I said, the ones found in San Tomé, there's a small group of E1B1B there. But we got to follow the trail of E1B1B. They're the Moors. They're the ones that came over there. They settled there. We also know those were the ones in the caliphates, the ones that were ruling the caliphates. That's very important. Remember, after 600s, they pushed the Jews out of Arabia. That's how we know that they're the Arabians. Because from 711 to such and such time, they were ruling in those areas. It's important to understand. They pushed out the Israelites out of that area, which is known in the Battle of the Foss. They were pushing them out, and they went against them. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously E1B1B and E1B1A has their ancient problems. That doesn't mean that the problems have to continue on. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying the problems got to continue on. But L3 and E lineages, especially the E lineages, they're Shemites. The E lineages, there's no doubt the E lineage is Shemites. There's no arguing about that. The E lineage is a Shemite, and the L lineage is connected with the E lineage, right? We're talking, we got L1s, L2, L3, things like that. Because remember, Israel mixed with Hamites. That's important to understand. Ephraim, Manasseh, those are going to be a mix of the Egyptians that were there, right? You're going to have L1, L2, L3, all those that's going to be mixed there, especially L3, L2. Those are going to be some major ones that were found in that area. It's going to be very major, very, very major. But just for the clarity, I just want to go and talk about L3. I just want to summarize this one more time. FamilyTree DNA is not updating their information. FamilyTree DNA and many other genetic companies cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted because this is an example of a conversation that I had in the background with these individuals. That many of their haplogroup descriptions have not been updated since 2010 or earlier. Who knows how worse it is with other companies? Because FamilyTree DNA is pinpoint studying your Y DNA and your mtDNA. They're supposed to be the best at your Y and your mtDNA. If they're best at mtDNA and your Y DNA, imagine how much worse the other companies are. Imagine how much worse. Because this is actually very important to understand that what I'm bringing out, when we bring this out, even brothers, even if it comes to a point where we may differ at the nitty gritty, like there's individuals that believe Israelites are E1B1B, some believe Israelites are E1B1A. I am highly firm that Israelites are E1B1A. That's one of those things that isn't nitty gritty, but we know that they're Shemites. The E lineage is no doubt E1. In fact, I'm gonna give you one more piece of information that a geneticist theirself, I already talked about this and showed it, that a geneticist theirself say with their own mouth, out of their own mouth, that the E1B1 lineages are the lineages of the Israelites. You hear what I'm saying? In fact, I think it's on here. It's right on here. Let me show you something right here. Right here. So he goes on and says right here, he says basically this: the Y chromosome haplotypes of the ancient Israelites are typically E1B1 and T1 groups. Now that's why I did a live about T. We know it's not T, there's no doubt. But T came with E1B1B when E1B1B went up and went back down. That's a genetic quote that talks about that. That's a genetic quote that actually talks about that, where it talks about the E lineage that was up in the north in ancient times, Roman in the ancient times, ruling in the Bronze Age collapse and things like that. And even back then, ruling in up there. It's known that the E group came down and brought the H and T with them, right? That's one of those things it's no doubt. That's what they talk about. It says these are to date the oldest E1B1B individuals, the ones that found the Levant. There's no fossil of E older than in the Levant. That's important to understand. That's why they call it Eurasian. The same haplogroups show up in pre-pottery Neolithic B Jordan, right? Accompanied by new haplogroups H2 and T. So H2 and T, the first time they come down into the Levant is when the E1B1B goes up and then comes back down. That's important to understand. And so that's very important because we know about the Bronze Age collapse and things that happened of old. That's very important. And we can see the migrations because E dominated the Levant. E dominated it. It dominated. But we're talking L3. So just for clarity on the understanding of what we're saying, I just want to show some of those things. And I just want to talk about these lineages that we know without a doubt that they are going to be out of Africa. So this information that this person wrote in 2009, bad information. It's not finished. It's not finished. It needs to be updated. So you see it yourself that the L3 lineage is actually found outside of Africa. Though it migrated there, that's one of those things that we have to understand migration pattern. It's important. So multiple genetic sources agree with it. So be careful when looking at the information. There is truth to be found. So with that, family, I'm glad that brothers are looking into these things That's always good. As I love when brothers are looking into these things. Maybe during the week or sometime we can talk about these things detailedly. We can look at these things detailedly. So with that, family, just for the clarity, just for clarity, L3 is no doubt. There is no doubt. With is solid. L3 has no doubt is found outside of Africa. It's found outside of Africa in major numbers in way later times than they're found in Africa. So that means that they were displaced. They got into Africa somehow from some type of migration. And that's going to be obviously important to know that L3 and your E lineages are not native to Africa, but they are actually Mesopotamian. They're actually going to be from the Fertile Crescent, from your Euphrates, above Syria, right in the Levant. They're going to actually, homeland is actually Israel. So just understand this when I say this, that what we're bringing out is not because of hate, but it's because of truth. It's because truth cries in the streets that need to be heard. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved.